Hello, I'm Quinn Costello here with the SF Indie Fest, the Green Film Festival, and we are here with some of the filmmakers from the Climate Activism program, and really looking forward to hearing more about these films. Um, Maybe we can start with Leslie. Leslie, can you tell me a little bit about Prayer Run for the Santa Ritas and how you came to this project and yeah, what was it that about this material that kind of resonated with you as a filmmaker?
My name's Leslie, as you said. I'm in Tucson, Arizona, and very close to us, what we call our backyard, is a mountain range called the Santa Rita Mountain Range, which is also part of the ancestral homeland of the Tohonatham people who have been here, as they say, forever. And I taught at the Indian College, as they call it. It's their name, not mine. But it's a community college, tribal college out in on the nation. Anyway, I taught there, got to know them a lot better, but I'd also been working on a film, and I'm still working on it, a longer film about there was a jaguar that showed up and was actually recorded multiple times on photographs and even in video, that was named locally El Jefe, and I've been working on a film about that for some time. And so I already knew everyone but Marlinda Francisco, the runner. But I was asked if I would help film for an organization that's trying to stop the mine from going in there, because it's been fought over for 20 years, and basically every municipality in the area is against the mine, but mining law allows them to do what they want if they have a claim. They were stopped because they didn't have a claim to all the public land. They wanted to put their tailings and refuse and all kinds of stuff on, and they've started again. They've come up with a new plot, and that involves, if they get away with it, taking off a whole mountaintop and driving the tailings over from the east to the west side of the mountain. So anyway, this woman, Marlinda Francisco, who's a long distance runner, Tohonatham runner, doing very well as a long distance runner, and she was going to run by the area of the Rosemont mine at sunrise. And I got involved, and Austin Nunez, who I knew, who's the chairperson of one of, they call them districts on the Son of Your on the nation. Anyway, the Tohonatham were broken up into districts. They didn't do it. It was done for them by our government, but he's been the chairperson of this district for some time. He's a very involved activist and environmentalist, as well as a chairperson, but just an amazing human. And so he came out and did a blessing, and he agreed to let me film it. And I did. And then I had this material. My friend from the Center for Biological Diversity, Russ McSpadden, had filmed it, an aerial filming of it. It was pretty crazy. I mean, we're like, trying to get this stuff done, and very last minute. But then I was like, well, I got to tell a story. I can't just show somebody running and everybody goes, what's that all about? So I tried to give a very short story about what's going on out there right now, but there's a bigger story behind it. Sorry.
Yeah, I understand that this film is part of a series. Can you kind of tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, yeah, I guess it is kind of a series. It's becoming one. It wasn't planned that way. Like I said, I got in 2016 was when we first saw the video of El Jefe, and there's this gorgeous animal in the mountains, 30 miles away from Tucson. It's crazy, and that's how good jaguars are at staying under, out of people's eyes and away from people. They don't like people at all. They don't want to be around them. They don't have anything to do with them. And this area is known to have jaguars on it from time to time, because we do have wild public lands here that have been protected up until recently pretty well. So I knew about the mine, had been against it for some time, and I thought, well, somebody should do a film about this. And as a result, then, right as I started to work on it was when the Trump administration took over the United States White House and started rolling back a bunch of environmental laws very quickly, much to our shock and dismay, and leaning on people here and everywhere to allow things to happen that had never been allowed before, because the EPA has been opposed to this project for some time. The mine that they want to build, an open pit copper mine, would actually it would go beneath the watershed level. So it has a very possible, scientifically proven opportunity to drain the watershed, and the watershed gives 20% of groundwater to Tucson and lots of surrounding areas. So it's a bad idea. So anyway, that started, but then there's a wall that went up across all our wildlands and parks and monuments and federal land during like 1919 or 2019 and 2020. And that stops the jaguars. They can't climb a 30-foot wall or 18-foot wall. So it's just made the story kind of go, whoa, I've had to figure some things out. So I'm back on it and taking things in segments, but I still have a vision for an overall story. Sorry, it's been a 4 or 5 year ordeal.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the documentary process. Sometimes, you kind of get started on something and you think it'll be, relatively quick, and then 5 years later, you're still involved in it, and tracking that story. So anyway, thank you so much for sharing your piece with us. Really appreciate that. And Dan, can you tell us a little bit about how you got started with salt lines, and just take us through what drew you to the material?
Yeah, sure. I'm based in Barcelona, but I'm actually from Scotland, and I've been covering climate as a crisis for the best part of 20 years. I've worked in 127 countries, and Salt Lines is quite an unusual film for us, because we're doing a global series at the moment, shooting in South America and Africa and in Europe, and we wanted to tell a story in America, and we struck upon the idea of telling an intimate narrative around lobster fisherwomen in Down East Maine. For those of you not familiar with Maine, it's the very rural part of Maine, almost towards the Canadian border. And the reason that we were interested in the lobster narrative in particular was because of history, I guess. At the moment, it is plain sailing for lobster fishermen, and certainly in Down East Maine, there's an abundance of lobster. But that certainly wasn't the case further south, where we saw the lobster catch collapse and industry become decimated. And that is predicted to happen also in the north. And we certainly felt that telling an intimate story of an individual, of a woman, of a female lobster fisherman, was a unique way to show, I guess, the existential and external threat that we have from climate, but also to tell the story through a mother whose only livelihood is lobster fishing and has 2 small children. So we felt that that was a really emotional and intimate way to draw the viewer into the story. Salt Lines has done really well, actually, and it's the shortest film that we've made in this new series, and it's been received very well in film festivals. I think one of my criticisms of America, in particular in terms of film festivals, is that America likes to watch films about America, and Salt Lines has done really well in American film festivals and Canadian film festivals. And I think that one of the most important things to understand with climate is how we're so interconnected. The same issues that are impacting fishermen and fisherwomen in Senegal and West Africa are the same issues that are affecting fishers in Maine and other parts of America. And certainly, as we saw in Florida in the last week or so, with the extreme weather surges we're seeing there, this is really pretty much the new future. One of the main things that comes across in Salt Lines, I think personally, is a fragility. And I think that one of the things that that COVID taught us, the pandemic taught us, that we are fragile as a species. And we wanted to touch upon that in Salt Lines, that there's this kind of, there's actually a term for it. I made a film in Greenland about a concept called solastalgia. And solastalgia is a psychological state of mind related to climate. And it was originally diagnosed by an Australian psychiatrist. looking at the Aboriginals. And really what it is the term is basically this: solastalgia is feeling homesick in your own home. And what it does is it creates this kind of discombobulation and discomfort in your psychological makeup. You start to feel, and I guess a lot of the Native American First Nation reservations have felt the same. Solastalgia is your landscape changing around you, and you just can't really explain why. And that creates this discomfort and this disconnection between nature and the people living in the land. And I think that we definitely get that in Maine, where people are noticing the weather changing. They're noticing the tide shifting. Winter, the seasons are mixed up in some respects. They blend into one another. And I think that's what we try to communicate through the intimate story of a female fisherwoman. A sense of uncertainty was the key message.
And can you kind of talk about, like, coming from a different country and then, getting to know this community of people? How were you received? And was there kind of curiosity about why you wanted to tell this story, or was there a reticence amongst the folks there?
No, I mean, in fact, I'm working class myself. So going into a blue collar community in Maine is, I'm a Scot, right? There's a lot of Irish stock up there. And so I guess for me, it's, going to the bars, have a beer. I can fit in anywhere. So I didn't really feel that. I felt the community welcomed us with open arms. And in fact, on day 2, we were given 6 lobsters to take home on the promise that we cooked them. Well, the challenge for us, of course, was we were all pretty much vegetarian, and we kind of said, look, we're going to do it. We're going to cook these lobsters. And then so I went on a website as to how to euthanize lobsters. And one of the ideas was you put them in the freezer. It's not going to be as painful. And then so we did that. We euthanized the freezer, and then we cooked them. And then about a couple of weeks later, a friend of mine as a chef said, no, that's the worst possible thing to do to lobsters. So we're lobster torturers as well, right? So now it's like we've got that on our conscience. But I definitely think the community very much welcomed us. We are an international crew from South Africa, from the UK, and from Scotland. But we definitely we had some unusual stories to tell them about the world. But I think that some of the stories we told them about other fishing communities on the front line of climate resonated with them. And I think this is the idea of we can see the way that the climate crisis is unfolding is ocean citizens are going to be on the front line more than anyone. We saw what happened last week in Florida. We're certainly going into an epoch where people will start moving away from coastlines. And then you start to consider the importance of fishing and the protein. Like 20% of the world's protein comes from fish. It's a staple of communities all across the world. And how we will cope with that transition. And I think it's important to tell ocean stories at this it's not even an early stage. We've all gone past the point of denial around climate, but I think it's important to make a historic record in terms of how people live their lives, because in 50 years' time it won't be the same.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story with us, and it was really, really amazing to have it as part of this program. Thank you.
No, you're very welcome. Thank you. And congratulations to everyone else on their lovely films. And I'm afraid I shall be leaving. So I'll see you guys soon.
All right. Thank you, Dan.
All the best. Cheers. Cheers. Bye.
Cheers. So I see that Chris Graves just joined the call, and I know that you're in transit. So maybe we'll switch over to you real quick. And Chris, are you with us? Can you unmute yourself? Okay, maybe we'll pause and we'll circle back to you, Chris. I don't know if you're able to hear us, but we'll circle back to you in just a moment. So Claire and Jesse, how did you get involved in telling this story about regenerative cannabis?
We've been working together for about 4 years, making short films about regenerative cannabis. There's an event called the Emerald Cup, which is a pretty big deal in the cannabis community in California. And it's a big celebration of who grows the best weed, basically. And so normally they're kind of only honoring the farms that grow the highest THC, kind of the strongest flower. But Jesse wanted to start a conversation about you know, it's not just important that you're growing good weed, it's also important that you're using your farm practices that you're using are helping the environment. And so he created the Regenerative Farm Award to kind of honor these regenerative cannabis farms that are also growing a lot more than just cannabis. And they're raising animals, they're raising families, they're growing vegetables for the farmers market. And so, yeah, I started tagging along on these farm visits, and I have a background in filmmaking. And so, yeah, we just started releasing these short films to tell the story of these farms. And then that developed into a longer project. Maybe Jesse can talk about that.
Yeah, yeah. So these short films were able to connect people to the farm at the event. And so like when we're giving the award, all of a sudden people can actually be at this farm and see the practices and see the integrated animals and see the plants and see the soil building and the community work. And so just bringing it beyond just the flower and best products, and actually honor the practices, the community work, and the work for the environment. I've been interested in regenerative agriculture for a while, and the importance of soil, and got a puppy, and the way that we grow a plant kind of has the power to either harm or heal the planet. And seeing how industrial agriculture all over the world has had a tremendously negative impact as cannabis became an industry and is legal more and more places, that it's a growing industry and more people will be growing and more people will be growing in potentially resource excessive ways that aren't so great for the planet. So showing farms that really are doing something that's actually helping, where they're thinking about their greater ecosystem, they're thinking about their forest systems, they're thinking about their watershed, and they're thinking about building soil, which is actually sequestering carbon. And one of the examples in it, Bryceland Forest Farms, they started doing no-till, and switching over to that soil building no-till practices, they were able to go from 6% organic matter, which is pretty good, to 24% organic matter, which meant 14% sequestered carbon, stable carbon in that soil. And that translates to like 120 tons on their little acre plot, which if you take that and multiply that, that could really help our planet at this point. And people just actually being connected to the source of what we grow, of agriculture, of food, and also medicine and cannabis medicine. Like, it really matters where we source and who we get our food and our medicine from, and their practices, both with the environment, the planet, and the community.
And so this is a 20-minute short film that we submitted to the Green Film Festival, but we're just are almost finished with the hour-long version of the film. So we follow these 3 farms throughout the course. All 3 farms won the Regenerative Farm Award. They're all really good examples of these practices. And so we thought we would do a deeper dive into really spending a year in the life of what it's like for these farmers, and showing the problem of industrial agriculture and proposing regenerative agriculture as one of the solutions.
Yeah, all these. Okay, go ahead.
Oh, please.
I was gonna say, all these farms are just incredible examples, and so we started in the spring and got to film throughout the year and show the whole process of that happens on the farm. One of them's an amazing biodynamic farm, so we get to dive into the mysteries behind that and the way of the mindset of giving back and honoring the earth and the practices, and doing different practices to build soil diversity. Green Source Gardens, or that's Radical Herbs, who is an incredible biodynamic farm. Green Source Gardens has been an incredible example in regenerative cannabis, and showing where cannabis can be grown, how it can build soil, how you can build tons of polyculture, and how you can heal a actually more devastated landscape in that practice. The land that they were working on was very compacted serpentine hillside that had been mined and logged at a certain point, and so they've actually been able to help heal their forest and also their agricultural site through their practices. And then Bryceland Forest Farms here in Humboldt is just an incredible example of growing lots of food, having farmers market, and growing incredible cannabis as well.
And can you talk about finding, the connection between these three different farms in the edit room and some of the challenges that you faced as you were figuring out a way to structure it?
Yeah, so I edited the film and we had kind of a linear narrative in mind. But yeah, we did play around with the structure as far as, cannabis starts, all these farms grow from seed. So it starts with a seed in March and it's a long, slow arc till harvest, till these beautiful, 10, 15 tall plants are ready to harvest in October. So the problem of kind of making it clear that it was about cannabis, kind of front loading, we were kind of burying the lead as far as like, oh, I see they're raising animals. I see these are family farms, but it was maybe not so clear that like, this is about cannabis and look how beautiful and look how amazing when it's grown with these practices, it can be really kind of a mind-blowing thing to experience just walking underneath the canopy of these huge plants. So in the end, I think, one of the decisions we made for the finished film is to, we made a montage essentially of like all of just the gorgeous stunner shots of the beautiful gardens. And we ended up putting that at the beginning as sort of a teaser of like, this is what's waiting for you at the end of the film. Stay tuned. This is how amazing it can look. And then it's sort of a building up of, you got a taste of it. And then now you're waiting in anticipation of harvest, which is really like this beautiful, kind of climax, right? It's the payoff of what you've been seeing, all of the love and the care going into it. At the end is really the celebration. But I think that was a way to integrate footage because we spend about, a few minutes on each farm throughout the course of the film. And so, there's certain moments where it seemed necessary for the story to integrate everyone's stories into one theme. We also talk about and this is in the full version of the film, not the short you're going to see, but, there's a big problem with waste and plastic, and all of these legal cannabis farms have to package things into grams and joints, and there's so much plastic waste and plastic packaging that is really a problem, and we wanted to call attention to that. And that's another little montage that ends up happening of everyone kind of expressing their frustration about, we care so much about wanting to farm sustainably, and so at the end having to put it in these non-recyclable, non-reusable plastic containers is really unfortunate. And so we're kind of trying to like raise awareness about that partially.
Well, thank you both so much for sharing your film with us, and really look forward to seeing the next in this series and the next iteration of this story.
We'll be releasing the feature later this year, early next year, so stay tuned.
Oh, that's great. That's great. I look forward to it. Let us know when that's all ready to go.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much for including us.
Oh, yeah. Thank you for being a part of it. So I wanted to switch back over to Chris Graves, who's joined us in transit. I understand that you had a flight that got delayed or canceled.
Yeah, I was supposed to fly out of San Jose at 6:30 in the morning, got canceled.
Yeah.
I had to take a lift to SFO. I'm sitting in SFO waiting for them to call my boarding.
Oh, okay, great. Well, maybe do you want to start? We'll just go. Feel free to go if you have to. But can you kind of like talk to us a little bit about what got you interested in telling the story of Angelica and Forest of Hope, and how you came to this story?
Okay, so I don't know if how much anyone knows about each other's projects. Forest of Hope's about a environmental. She's kind of an activist, an advocate, and she also runs a forest nursery. She grows trees in the mountains of Monterey, Mexico, and helps reforest those areas. And she's 71, and she runs a cooperative. And with that cooperative, the ladies that work with her, they make money off of it too, that sustains their own village. So these women who haven't had indoor plumbing can now get, a bathroom put into their house. So it's this really cool little thing that's going on there. And I got connected to Mary Kay that sponsors this program, and they wanted to do a short film on Angelica, and I got all the stuff about Angelica, and I kind of came up with how we could tell this story, because it's just really inspirational for me to see this 71-year-old woman kind of revitalizing her own community, but also the forest around her. And she actually doesn't know how much of a ripple effect she has.
And what was her attitude about being the subject of a film? How did you kind of build trust? And can you tell me a little bit more about your relationship?
Yeah, so I grew up in Mexico City. So I'm actually bilingual, and I actually know I'm what's called a third culture kid. So I'm very well versed in both the Mexican culture and the American culture. And so when I first started talking to her, there was the language was not a barrier there, which is always a big kind of icebreaker. And she's just like a grandmother, to be honest. And I kind of I interview people for a living. I do documentary television, and I'm a producer on that. Like, in fact, I was here on a murder show, if people like murder shows. So
People love their murders these days.
People love their murder shows. There's a big one in '84 in San Jose. Anyway, so it was just a series of phone calls with her initially. They actually had that fire you see in the documentary. We were supposed to shoot before that hit them, and then we postponed because they had to be evacuated. And so we waited until there was a moment that, things had calmed down. And so their whole community and many communities on that. This is in the Sierras. It's a place called Los Cumbres, and it's in the Mexican Sierras. So it's way up in the hill, in the mountains where they live. And they all had to be evacuated to come down from the mountain for this giant fire that had hit them, that was started by human error. Somebody had not put out their fire properly. So they deal with human error up there, as well as lightning strikes have started fires up there, and logging has decimated the forest. So they're busy trying to rebuild that and rebuild their environment up there. But to answer your question, I'm also charming, and so we just got along.
That always helps, right? And what's next for you? I mean, I know that you're working producer, and but do you plan to continue making films in Mexico as well?
When the opportunity arises, sure. I've also got a feature film I've written that's narrative, and I've got a podcast going called Blissful Spinster, if anyone's interested in listening to that. I always try to fold in, whether it's environmental messaging or social justice or anything else, into what I do, whether it's narrative or documentary. I know it's hard with the murder shows, but with that stuff, I always try to, if there's a person of color or a female police officer, investigator, things like that, I just think visibility and representation matter in all areas. So we can all work on those things, no matter what you're working on, and no matter how commercial it might seem.
Well, thank you so much for being a part of the film festival, and I'll let you get on your flight. Thank you for joining us amidst these challenging circumstances.
Yeah.
But hope you have safe travels.
I thought this movie means a lot to me, and this is super important for me to try to come to the Q&A. So thank you so much for including me, and congratulations to everyone who's gotten into the festival. And I'm looking forward to watching all of your pieces.
Thanks, Chris. So Matt, I guess, so this film strikes me as being another one of these kinds of, not an invisible topic, but maybe something that we're not thinking about all the time, which is where our water comes from and what the impact is of the water that we use to water our lawns and drink and do everything that we need to do. So can you kind of talk to me a little bit about what got you thinking about this idea as an idea for a film, and what some of the challenges were, and when you were kind of setting out to figure out how to tell this story?
Sure. So I'm a nonprofit professional up in the Eastern Sierra here in California, and for those of you who are not familiar with California and its water management, approximately 80 to 90% of the water that's used in California is imported. And so that water needs to come from areas like the Colorado River, or the Central Valley, or in our case, the Eastern Sierra. And so we, in 2018, Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, who owns most of the land up Owens Valley, announced that they were going to take the existing water leases, which is used primarily by family ranches, and reduce that amount to potentially zero. So, which would be catastrophic for the livestocking and agricultural families in the Eastern Sierra. It'd also be detrimental to fishermen and outdoor recreation enthusiasts, which is kind of the backbone of the economy here in the Eastern Sierra. And so we a bunch of environmental nonprofits and native tribes and the Cattlemen's Association all got together and formed a coalition. And I've been doing environmental nonprofit work for 20 years, and I can tell you that it's very, very rare to see environmentalists kind of standing shoulder to shoulder with cattle ranchers. That just almost never happens. But in this case, our ranchers have been such good stewards of the landscape. And the landscape that we're talking about here is alpine meadow landscape wetlands, which are tremendously important, not just for the local ecology, but in the fight against climate change, right? They're highly efficient carbon sinks. And so if the LADWP reduced all the water and desiccated that landscape, we'd see non-native invasive plants such as cheatgrass and Russell thistle move in and really take over that landscape, convert it from an efficient, carbon sink and thriving wetland habitat into a dry kind of dusty, fire-prone landscape, which is, if you're living up anywhere in California, that's not what you want. So when we decided to get together and try to fight LADWP, and it's really important for us to educate the ratepayers down here in Southern California. Most of people, including myself, when I lived down here, we just get up in the morning and turn on the spigot and not think where our water comes from. But we want to educate them that, hey, this water's coming from someplace, and that someplace also relies on this water. And so we decided to do, in the pursuit of storytelling, do this film. And so we received a grant from Metabolic Studios, which is a kind of it's hard to describe, but it's almost like a forward-thinking art meets environment passion project of this woman, Lauren Bond, who, is just really passionate about water issues here in California, environmental issues. And through them met our director, Jonathan Hyla, and then we worked on this film for about 2 years, all the way through the COVID outbreak. And we just finished it earlier this year and have been on tour. And, all the audiences have been really receptive to hearing this message and wanting to get involved. I think kind of opening their minds that, hey, it is important where my water comes from. And of course, here in Southern California, a lot of us grew up going to Eastern Sierra, Mammoth to go skiing, or Eastern Sierra to go fishing. So they have a lot of familiarity and grew up, with this experience and have a lot of strong feelings toward it generationally. And so there's a lot of support there. So that's kind of where we are, and just have been taking it out on the road for festivals and trying to move the ball forward in terms of getting LADWP to change their mind.
And can you talk a little bit about how you met some of the interview subjects who you feature in the film, and then also how you came to work with, is it David Chokachi, the narrator? Chokachi, yeah, had a very distinctive voice. It felt like an additional character in the film.
Yeah, thank you. So all of the people that we featured in the film are part of our coalition. So I think one of the first people we interview is Monty Benga, and Monty had been working on water issues down in the valley, in Owens Valley, for over 20 years, and very respected person, very familiar, very passionate, outspoken character in water issues. Unfortunately, Monty just passed away about a month or two ago. We're having a memorial for him tomorrow night, as a matter of fact, in Lone Pine. But he's in the film, and then we talk with another person, Chris Hohag, he's also a tribal member. He is the current representative for the Sierra Club in their Toyabe chapter. And of course, he's very familiar and been working on those issues for years. Wendy Schneider with Friends of the Inyo, who have been doing just tons of great work. Matt Kemp, who is the rancher that we see in the film, the guy with the cowboy hat and the beautiful family. His family's been ranching on that land for 3 generations, even predating LADWP. And so I think with all these different figures, these vibrant figures that make up this coalition, it was kind of, well, actually, I wouldn't say it was easy. It was actually hard picking out who we're going to have in the film. We could have, made the film twice as long and talked to everybody, but we want to get a real good cross section of, environmentalists, tribal representatives, and the ranchers to really talk about the impacts. And the impacts are everything from risk of fire to health issues to loss of cultural elements to outdoor recreation. And so we think we did a really good job in capturing that in the film. And so as we wrapped up, we knew that we wanted to do a narrative voiceover. And then I had been working with David Chokachi previously. I used to work for the Surfrider Foundation, and David is real passionate about coastal issues. And so I rang him up and I said, hey, I know you're busy. He's always working on different film projects. I go, but can you maybe help us out here? And luckily we caught him at the tail end of that COVID thing. So the productions were kind of down, and he's like, absolutely. So he went and did the voiceover and just nailed it, and David's one of those guys, and Hollywood's full of these people, but he's kind of one of those unsung heroes that is always willing to donate his time and his expertise to help different causes.
Well, thank you so much for sharing this story with the festival. And thanks to all of you, as a matter of fact, who are still on the Zoom, and really look forward to hearing and seeing what you all do next. So
thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. And thanks for sharing your stories, everybody else.
Yep. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.